Imagine a tax that only applies to goods coming from another country. That's a tariff. Tariffs are one of the oldest tools in international trade, shaping the way countries interact and compete. They can make foreign products more expensive, giving local businesses a better chance to thrive. But they can also spark tensions and disrupt global supply chains. Governments use tariffs for several reasons: to protect domestic industries from foreign competition, to raise money for the state, or to send a strong political message to other nations. Sometimes, tariffs are used as bargaining chips in negotiations, or as a way to punish countries for actions seen as unfriendly or unfair. In early 2025, President Trump's administration shocked the world by announcing a sweeping 50% tariff on all goods imported from India. This was not a targeted measure on a few products, but a blanket policy affecting every single item coming from India to the United States. In effect, it was like building a massive economic wall between two of the world's largest democracies, instantly changing the rules of trade and cooperation. The Trump administration justified this drastic move by pointing to India's ongoing and deepening ties with Russia, especially in the areas of oil imports and major defense deals. These relationships were seen as undermining U.S. efforts to isolate Russia on the global stage. The message from Washington was clear: choose a side in a tense global standoff, or face serious economic consequences. Overnight, everything from Indian jewelry and textiles to life-saving pharmaceuticals and everyday consumer goods became 50% more expensive for American importers and shoppers. The impact rippled through businesses, retailers, and even ordinary families. This was far beyond the scope of typical tariffs. It signaled the start of a full-blown trade war, with both sides bracing for retaliation and escalating measures. The Trump administration claimed it was acting to protect American interests and jobs, but critics, ranging from economists to business leaders, warned of severe consequences for both nations, including higher prices, lost jobs, and damaged diplomatic ties. Businesses on both sides of the ocean faced immediate uncertainty. Supply chains and partnerships that had been built over decades were suddenly at risk, with companies scrambling to adapt to the new reality. The stage was set for a high-stakes economic confrontation, one that would test the resilience of industries, the adaptability of workers, and the strength of the U.S.-India partnership in the face of unprecedented challenges. For American families, the sudden imposition of 50% tariffs on Indian goods hit home fast, sending shockwaves through household budgets across the country. Overnight, families found themselves facing higher costs for many of the products they rely on every day. Prices for everyday essentials like shrimp, basmati rice, and spices jumped overnight, making weekly grocery trips more expensive and forcing families to make tough choices about what to buy and what to leave behind. Clothing and textiles made with Indian cotton also became noticeably pricier, putting extra strain on already tight budgets. Parents shopping for back-to-school clothes or seasonal wardrobes found themselves paying more for the same items, or having to settle for lower-quality alternatives. U.S. businesses, especially those in the technology and pharmaceutical sectors, faced higher costs for critical Indian imports. These industries depend on specialized components and raw materials from India, and the tariffs forced them to rethink their supply chains almost overnight. Many business owners scrambled to find new suppliers, often at higher prices, or were left with no choice but to pass these increased costs directly to consumers. This led to a ripple effect, with price hikes spreading across a wide range of products and services. Small and medium-sized businesses were hit hardest, lacking the financial resources and flexibility to adapt quickly to the new trade environment. Many struggled to stay afloat, and some were even forced to close their doors for good. The pharmaceutical sector was especially vulnerable. India supplies key ingredients for many generic drugs that Americans depend on. With tariffs driving up costs, the supply of affordable medicine became uncertain. Hospitals and patients faced rising medical bills, as the increased cost of drugs and medical supplies threatened to create a public health crisis. For many, life-saving treatments became harder to afford, adding stress and uncertainty to already difficult situations. Meanwhile, American farmers lost access to the growing Indian market as India retaliated with its own tariffs. This sudden loss of a major export destination left many farmers with unsold crops and mounting financial pressure. U.S. agricultural exports like almonds and apples were suddenly shut out, leaving warehouses full and orchards with fruit left unpicked. The impact was felt not just by farmers, but by entire rural communities dependent on agriculture. Ironically, the very people the tariffs aimed to protect, American workers and farmers, were caught in the crossfire, facing job losses, reduced hours, and an uncertain future. The trade war's impact rippled through every layer of the U.S. economy, touching families, businesses, and communities alike, and leaving many to wonder when relief would come. In India, the tariffs hit like an economic earthquake, shaking the very foundations of its export-driven economy. The impact was immediate and profound, sending ripples through various sectors. Export-driven industries, from textiles in Tirupur to jewelry in Jaipur, faced cancelled U.S. orders and factory shutdowns. The once bustling factories now stood silent, a stark reminder of the sudden halt in international demand. Thousands lost jobs and local economies suffered as spending dried up. The ripple effect was felt in small towns and large cities alike, where businesses struggled to stay afloat amidst dwindling sales. For many, the trade war threatened their path out of poverty. Families who had just begun to see a glimmer of hope were now faced with uncertainty and fear for the future. The Indian government responded by doubling down on its Made in India campaign, urging self-reliance and domestic consumption. This initiative aimed to bolster local industries and reduce dependency on foreign markets. Tax cuts and reforms were promised to cushion the blow, but the transition was slow and painful. Many businesses found it challenging to adapt to the new policies, and the promised relief seemed distant. Replacing the U.S. market was a monumental challenge, leaving many businesses struggling to survive. The search for new markets was fraught with difficulties as global competition intensified. The crisis forced India to rethink its growth strategy and dependence on a single trading partner. Economists and policymakers debated new directions, seeking to diversify trade relationships and strengthen the domestic economy. The tariffs exposed the risks of global economic interdependence. It was a wake-up call for India to build a more resilient and self-sufficient economic framework. For millions, the trade war was not just policy, it was a personal crisis. It affected daily lives, altering plans and dreams, and forcing communities to come together in support. The shockwaves would reshape India's economic future for years to come. As the nation navigated these turbulent times, the lessons learned would guide its path forward, fostering innovation and resilience in the face of adversity. The trade war didn't just hurt economies, it fractured U.S.-India relations. Years of partnership built on shared democratic values and counterbalancing China were suddenly at risk. In New Delhi, the tariffs felt like a betrayal, eroding trust and goodwill. Diplomatic talks stalled and high-level meetings were cancelled. The U.S. demanded India distance itself from Russia. India refused to be dictated to. The result, a deep chill in relations and growing suspicion on both sides. India began to question the reliability of the U.S. as an ally. The world watched as two major democracies let a trade dispute undermine global stability. With the U.S. market closed, India pivoted eastward. Engagement with the BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, China, South Africa, deepened. India strengthened economic ties with China and continued energy and defense deals with Russia. Indian businesses sought new markets across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The goal: diversify trade and reduce vulnerability to any single nation's policies. This shift marked a strategic realignment, moving away from reliance on the West. The U.S.-India trade war inadvertently pushed India closer to America's rivals. A more fragmented global order began to emerge, with new alliances taking shape. The economic dispute had triggered a lasting geopolitical shift. When the dust settled, both economies were worse off. In the U.S., higher prices fueled inflation and hurt competitiveness. Retaliatory Indian tariffs closed off key markets for American farmers and manufacturers. In India, the loss of the U.S. market led to factory closures, rising unemployment, and stalled growth. Families on both sides saw their financial security threatened. The trade war revealed how deeply intertwined the two economies had become. Supply chains broke down, and the idea of a clear winner vanished. The real losers were ordinary families and workers in both countries. The conflict failed to achieve its goals and left a trail of economic pain. It was a stark reminder: in a globalized world, economic shocks are never contained. The U.S.-India trade war is a cautionary tale for the world. Using trade as a weapon backfired, damaging both economies and a vital partnership. India diversified its alliances, strengthening blocs like BRICS and challenging U.S. dominance. The episode raised doubts about tariffs as a tool of foreign policy. Nations are now seeking more resilient regional economic ties. The risk: a more divided, less efficient global economy. The lesson is clear: dialogue and cooperation are essential for shared prosperity. In a connected world, building bridges beats building walls every time.